G'day folks. Some 4 or 5 years ago, a family friend gave me some Tyco wagons and locomotives, not realising that I was into English locomotives, etc., and trains. And so I didn't want to disappoint him, so I accepted them gratefully and I thought that I could possibly use them in some way. And one of the items that he gave me was actually this Tyco crane, and it came with a bogie bolster wagon which had like a little caboose on the back of it. And I thought, after a while, I wonder if I can convert this over to an English style crane and use it on my railway. Now, the things that I'm up against, firstly, is the appearance of it, and with the big logo on the side there, which we'll have a look at. This one here, the Rock, and the couplings are the typical Tyco type couplings. So I thought, I've got a lot of bits and pieces of things I've collected over the years, and I thought I might be able to do something with it. And the first idea was to use a bogie bolster wagon that I've got, and then a bit more thought went into it, and finally thought, well, we'll move forward somehow. And you can see that I've done this on the 23rd of June 2015, so it's going back a little ways. But anyway, the first thing I did was change the couplings over. So I've put some small backmans fitted onto the bogies, and that wasn't terribly hard to do. And you can see that they line up at the same sort of height. So, I was on a winner for a start. The coupling height on the original bogies was the same as the old mainline wagon on the right there. So I thought instead of the bogie bolster, I might go with these small flat wagons that I had. These are ex-mainline, or they are mainline wagons, and I consequently converted them over to the small backman couplings as well. First thing I did was get onto the crane and remove the cabling and all that sort of thing. I started actually rubbing off the signage on one side there and cleaned it up a bit. And I found some odds and sods in my odds and sods drawer to actually create a little cradle here, I suppose, to hold the end of the jib on the flat wagon there, because when you go around curves with the crane, if you've got nothing to direct the jib in the direction that the train's going, it will swing out to the right or left as it goes around to a curve, which is not ideal at all. The crane cab doesn't follow the wagon. So I made up this little rest here. Now, the initial reason for that is to direct the jib in the direction that the train is going. And as I say, that was just off something that I had, and I've cut it down and modified it, and I thought that looks sort of industrial, looks about right, so that will do. And then of course it's all trial and error. You've just got to use the parts that you've got, unless you want to go out and make things individually. So the next thing I did was, because the crane is an American one, it doesn't have buffers and all that sort of thing. So I've cut off the front of an old Triang dock shunter. So this might look familiar when you see it there and in that context. So that's the front end of a Triang dock shunter. And I think there was a bit of a gap in the plastic where I'd cut it off, so I've put a strip of just a cereal box card on the top of that to disguise that. Now, folks, when you look at these things and you've got these red colouring here, and this bit of yellow attached to this frame here, it doesn't really look quite right. But you would be surprised what happens when you actually paint these things to match what they're on. Paint can hide a multitude of sins. Now, this is the other part of the same dock shunter, so that was put on the other end of the crane. So now I've got buffers there, I've got couplings at the right height, and it's just a matter of dressing it all up and getting it to work. And you can see I've got a second flat wagon up here ready to go. And the idea with those is to fit toolboxes to them and make them look the part. Again, just checking how everything goes together. And you can see the rock has been removed from the side of the crane. I was worried that that might show up underneath the paint when I paint it, but that looks pretty good. And folks, when you're not sure about how things are looking, it's always a good idea to take a black and white photograph. It gives you a better indication of how things are going, and to me that looks pretty good so far. And you can see how easily the jib rests in between those two upright posts there on the flat wagon. And then we check it in black and white, and yes, it looks okay. The crane has reasonable sort of rivet detail on it, so I think once it was painted up, that would show through fairly well. And there are options there to sort of highlight some of the details later on. Now folks, this is a little block out of a child's learning set of blocks. I don't know the name of them or anything, but this little block is about 10 millimeters square, and the length I've forgotten now, but it's probably 30 mils or something like that. But these little blocks came in various lengths, and the idea was some form of teaching of mathematics for small children. However, these blocks are going to become my toolboxes on the flat wagons. And so I wanted to have the toolboxes have a sort of a sloping lid on them. And to achieve that, I've made up a jig here with the two pieces here. The purpose of these two is to hold this green one while I sand it on my faceplate sander. So this piece here is purely, the orange piece is purely to hold the green piece, and so I don't sand my fingers away while it's on the sander. And you can see I've put it on the base plate of the sander here, and I've set the base plate at an angle, like normally it's set at 90 degrees to the sanding surface here. However, it's dropped down at an angle which I can't remember now, so that I can sand an accurate angle on the green block. And obviously I'll leave it set at that so I can repeat the process and make the little boxes. So here's 4 of them for one of the wagons. Now the wagon that supports the jib will just have 2, and they'll be slightly smaller to fit in. Looks pretty crude at the moment, folks, but it's all part of the process. Again, the colours throw you out. The colours lead your eye, the green leads your eye to these boxes, and you think that looks pretty awful, Gormo, but all will change in due course. So now, folks, the jib resting in between those 2 upright posts on the right there is not entirely satisfactory. What it needs is a rest under this section here. So I had this piece of U-shaped plastic from somewhere. Like I say, I keep stuff, and I'll use it one day. I had this piece of plastic which I shaped into this sort of triangle shape, and that became a rest for the jib. So what that does is it lifts the jib up slightly off the rest here on the floor, so that it pivots more easily and stays in place. You can also see I'm trialling here 2 smaller toolboxes, and they haven't been sanded yet. So there they are, sanded, so they'll fit in nicely each side of the jib. And the crane had this little railing here fitted to it, and that actually sat up at this level here, and I thought logic tells you that if you've got this area at the back, somebody could fall off if they're walking there, so I've fitted the railing onto the new section that I'd fitted there. And now I'm starting to colour up the areas that I've been adding on. So you can see with that yellow card colour gone now, it looks a bit better. And that's the railing fitted on at the back. Again, the old black and white test. So just as we go, we check it in black and white just to make sure we're on the right track. And you can see, folks, here this coach is a Pico, P-I-K-O coach, quite an old one that is going to be the subject of a conversion over to a tool van, which you quite often see on engineers' trains or breakdown trains. Another black and white just to check the progress, etc., etc. And my first attempt at making the box look better was just to add some brass strip with rivet detail on the top, but you can still see the wood grain, so I wasn't happy with that. And that probably showed up better in the black and white photo as well. So instead, I decided to cover the little wooden blocks with just card. It's only thin card. Thin card was cut out and glued over the block. I've cut strips of additional card to go over the lids on the box and down the back actually, and pushed rivet detail into these strips, and they to sort of symbolise heavy duty hinges. Here we've just used ordinary staples, and that's like a handle for the box, and the same here, this is a staple which acts like a lever to keep the box shut. And that's how it looks. Again, it looks pretty ordinary with all the different colours, etc. So I need to do all the boxes in the same way, and you can see how the detail goes right down the back of the box as well. So then I just coloured up one to sort of dull down the whole box there, the card colour, and this acts like a bit like an undercoat. I just wanted to check how I was going, and I'm quite happy with that result. And again, we check it in black and white. So yes, a few more of those to do. That gives you an indication of what it looks like. So you can see there's a few more done now. Now, initially I was going to use this brake van, but it's just not right. So don't worry about that, folks, that'll disappear soon. And just more images of how it's progressing. Then it was time to start painting the project, and I started out with this grey colour, and it was covering very well. Once it was dry, I wasn't really happy with this colour grey. I felt that based on the research that I'd done, a lot of the cranes are sort of black or very dark colours, and I just wasn't happy with this. So this has actually acted as an undercoat now, and I've gone over that with this much darker colour. So you can see I've started doing the one of the wagons there, and we've got the darker colour, and it's come out more like this. So all the parts were sprayed, airbrushed to get this result, and you can see what I mean about the parts, the new parts now blending in and looking as though they were always there. Now the cord or string, if you like, that is used in the crane to do the lifting, I thought I'd try to make it look like steel cable. So I just put some silver paint on a cloth, and then I pulled the string through the wet cloth, and the paint attached itself to the cord as it went through, and that's the result you get. Looks pretty good, I think. So it looks a bit like steel cable. And once the dark colour was done, the spraying was done, I started doing the detail. I've painted the red on the buffers, done axle boxes. The railing was painted white, and I've picked out some detail on the side here. These are actually step-ups, so I've painted them white. You can see some of my bits and pieces laying around that I've was considering using, but I think I've cut out just about everything I need now. So you can see the crane is coming together. And I was asked at the time if it would actually pick anything up, so I made up some ropes and everything so I could pick up a wagon. And yes, it does pick things up. And the black and white again to check progress. So here we are, we're just about done. What it needs is transfers on it to give it that extra bit of detail, and we need to do the buffers. They shouldn't be black. And this is how the boxes are starting to come up now. They look as though they've always been on there. And you can see the axle boxes there as well have done. And the rest for the jib. And if we just zoom in a bit on that, we can see that there's a bit of room here for the end of the jib to sit in just between these two posts. So you don't want a tight fit in there, you need a bit of play in it for when it goes around corners, etc. And that's some of the cable detail. I also got some shirt box material and fitted some glazing in the cab. There was no glazing originally. And you'll notice these two things here. There's a key that comes with the crane, and you can manually wind it up and down and do other movements with it with these two things here. I've also just picked out a bit of brass colour on the handles and so on, just to give it a bit more detail. Now what we need, as I said, is the buffers to be done, and we need the transfers to go on. That's just an idea what it looks like with the windings. So now you can see I've put some transfers on, and I think that's brought it up rather nicely. The buffers are also done. And there we have it. I also printed out the physical details. You have this, what would you call it, a sign that goes on to the most cranes to say what they can lift, and the specifications, how long they are, you know, what sort of weights they can handle, all that sort of thing. So you can't really read it, but I thought I'd put it on there anyway, because that seems to be, you can't even see it there. That seems to be the norm for these rather large cranes. Now I wanted the tool van to to go with the breakdown train. So as I said earlier, this is a Pico, P-I-K-O coach that I thought I would sacrifice and modify. What seems to be the case with railway companies in the old days is they would take a coach, and preferably a coach that wasn't being used too much, and convert it in some way to make it a place where there's probably toilet facility and would carry tools and all that sort of thing, possibly somewhere where the workers could eat and all that sort of thing. So to turn this into, to take it from being a European coach and turn it into something that looked more British, I had to get really aggressive with it and hack into it. So the wheels came off first, and then I needed to get rid of these verandas. And fortunately some of the parts are metal parts, and they're sort of riveted on, so they could come off quite easily. So I've got the parts there. I wanted to keep the buffers, and I've got to cut those verandas off. So that's done. And also I want to overlay card to look like wooden panelling, so I've scraped some of the details back to a flat surface so I can add card onto that, and even cover it up if I need to. And I've just used ordinary greeting card type card, and I've made myself a scribe so I can scribe the wood panel joins into the card, and marked out the pieces I need ready for cutting and all that sort of thing. And you can see where I've been with the blade and etc., and carved pieces away just to make the process a bit easier. So now we start adding the card on. So you can see I've covered up some windows, I've put these sliding doors on the side, I've got wooden panels down the bottom, I've left room here for the door, that'll stay as it is. I've also taken some of the roof vents off and shortened the roof. Added panelling to the end so you can't see that end door anymore that originally let you get out onto the veranda. And again folks, this looks pretty ordinary when it's set up like this, but a coat of paint will transform it into something totally different. You can see both sides. I'll just go back. That's one side and that's the other side. So just trying it out with the train to see how it looks, and it's really a bit hard to judge at this stage. And then we go to the spray booth. So I've done it a GWR brown. There's also solid glass glazing to go inside these wagons when they're finished. So it's sprayed up pretty well. Still looks pretty ordinary there, but you can see how the paint ties everything in, and it looks like the panelling looks like it was always there. And then I've added some transfers, and there's a step down below the double doors there for the workers to step up on and to get into the wagon. And the glazing's fitted as well. The buffers are back on. Just needs some couplings and it's ready to go. And that's how it sits on the train. Again, the brake van's wrong. Starting to look like it was always there, and you'll notice now I've got a proper brake van at the end, a Great Western brake van, and this has become from a Tyco crane, we've gone to a breakdown train. Okay, now I'll just show you a short video of the train going around the layout as it is at the moment. So that's all I've got for you folks. I'll catch up with you next time. Cheers, Gormo.